Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy blast and a half. Have any of you ever been laid off? I've definitely been laid off. Have you been laid off once? Twice? 3 times? I brought along an amazing guest today. If any of you have not met Stephen Gates, here he is, and Kermit, of course. But the reason why I brought Stephen on is I knew Stephen before any of this happened. I mean, I didn't know him, but I had connected with Stephen before. And he's a thought leader. He is a thought leader. And I don't mean that in the Kim Kardashian kind of way. I mean it in the way that he is helpful, useful, mentor-minded, a big thought leader and giver in ADP list. For any of you designers who are familiar with that, you obviously know Stephen. And he is the host of The Crazy One because he is crazy. And he is also a global design leader. And I think it was it like a week or 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, week and a half ago. Yeah.
A week and a half ago, a whopping, like 9-10 days?
Exactly.
He was laid off for the third time and publicly announced it on LinkedIn. And many people went, oh, I can't believe that this person like put this thing up here and they're saying that, he was laid off, and that's not something that I talk about. And since then, a lot has happened. So Stephen, thank you for coming. And I am beyond, he's crazy awesome. We're getting some really good love here. Thanks, Sean. He is crazy awesome. So thanks, Cheryl, and thanks, Kirsten. I always do that. Sorry about that. For showing up today. And Stephen, give it to us straight. Why did you, on this go around, decide to do it differently and to make a post that I don't even know what the response rate was, but
yeah,
I'm sure it's like off the charts.
I think it's somewhere north of 400,000 views at this point.
Viral.
I mean, look, yeah. Hi, my name's Steve Gates, and I've been laid off 3 times, which seems to be such a revolutionary statement for whatever weird reason. Look, it's funny because laid off has been such a fundamental part of my career, honestly. Like, me building a brand, me doing more public speaking, me doing all these things goes back to me getting laid off. So going back to like the .com boom, the company I was with decided to dabble a little bit in digital. Bubble goes pop. They decide to go back to doing print. I get laid off. I was 100% unprepared. Did not have my portfolio up to date, did not have my resume up to date, did not have any sort of network. And I sort of said to myself, like, hey, I need to be taken more seriously. And I made a promise to myself that from that day forward, I would never feel that helpless again.
Okay, stop right there. Wait, yeah. Stop right there. Okay, rewind 1 minute, because you said this went back to the first time. So I'm going to call it, you got burned, right? Here you were in the middle of the .com era to 2008, 2009. I don't know exactly what year it was, but you got burned. And what was going on in your head, aside from this little message and note to self? What was happening when that happened to you? Where were you emotionally? And where were you in terms of how to recover and pull yourself back together?
Sure. Well, I think we all have to admit, right? I think this is the hard part. And I think this is why you see the predominant reaction, which is getting laid off or getting fired is a personal rejection of your skills and your perceived value inside of a company. Even like I said, most of the time, this is a business decision, especially getting laid off is a business decision. Yet we internalize it. And I think part of the problem is it is pure imposter syndrome fuel. And so for me, yeah, I felt shattered. I felt like, what happened? Why didn't they see that I had more value? And, sort of quickly was like, wait a minute. This was much more about like the business decision and what happened. And I think even with last time I got laid off, right? Like I think it could have been anybody. I think it's just sometimes businesses go in other directions and that needs to happen. But yeah, I think there's a lot that's wrapped up in that. And that for me this time was like, nope, we're going to do this differently. And I think that for me was the big shift of what I've learned over time was like, look, coming out of my last role, I know what my contribution was. I'm completely comfortable with what I did. I know that I got a great performance review. Like, I know sort of what all those things are. And that's the funny part to me. And I think so much of my journey, like building my brand, started incredibly selfishly, right? It was like, look, I need to protect myself. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute, I can actually help people. And it turned into something else. But that was this time I'm just like, look, I've learned on so many topics, right? Like, it's all fun and games until you take your power back. And that was my thing, was like, I got the news on Thursday. My last day was Friday, and Monday at noon, the post went up. And I think it got 350,000 views in 72 hours. I had 20 job interviews last week. I've got about 30 this week. There's about 10 more next week. But the reaction has been, you're going to end your career. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You shouldn't share this. I hear from people every single day here. They're like, look, I'm too afraid to even put the open to work banner up on LinkedIn because I think it's going to somehow like be a stain on my career.
Exactly. So I want to also punctuate some of the things that you said. I love this line that we talked about even before the show. It's all fun and games until somebody takes their power back. And you learned when you got burned the first time that you have a lot of power in this process. You're actually wielding it and exercising it probably more so now based off of what you shared than you have in the past. And tell the audience what it means for you to have that power in this process. What you have built an incredible network very consistently over time. And it sounds to me, even from this far away, that the karma train is rolling in.
Well, look, but I think that's part of what I've discovered. I think that's what I've tried to teach so many other people has been like, I mean, for me, like personal branding isn't just sort of like an ego thing. That I do think if you really show up for it, if you really show up selflessly and honestly and contribute to things, that your brand does have incredible power. That, for me, it's really interesting because I can negotiate jobs differently because it means something when I go to work somewhere. It means something for the stages I can get on and do talks. It means something for the talent that I can attract to bring into that company, right? Like that all has tangible value and is a real part of that negotiation. But then the flip side of that also is that I've also learned that it means something when I leave. And so I think but I think that's been the interesting dynamic in so much of this is that a lot of companies a while ago, I think they've gotten better. It's a little strange to them when you show up as an equal, not as somebody who's just sort of thankful and grateful that you get a job, right? And I think that I've seen that so many times that whenever I ask people, I'm like, hey, did you negotiate your last salary? And they won't say anything. And they're like, no, I just was so glad to get it. Like, are you kidding me? I negotiated my severance. Like, for me, it's just, again, I think you have to show up as an equal in that negotiation. Like, ask and the worst they'll say is no. But I think that's what so much of this is for me, is just so many people I think have so much more power in this than they realize. But a lot of that also then requires a decent amount of self-acceptance. Like I have tattoos on both forearms dealing with my mental health journey into self-acceptance. But I think a lot of it is, can you accept yourself and again, what you want to do and what you want to stand for and put that out there? Because I hate to break it to everybody, you are far more than where you've worked or the awards you've won or where you went to school. And how many resumes I see that just are that. And it's like, but who the hell are you? Like, why are you different? But I think this ability to have this power.
This is really, it's almost as if we have the same conversation going in our head. And I think that there's been, of course, a great disservice to most candidates where they are either following a job description, being resume reliant and thinking, oh, here it is now, I'm done. Right. Like I got a recruiter, I got a headhunter. They'll do all the heavy lifting for me. And then they get to the interviews and sometimes, maybe too often, they're like, oh, you mean I really have to engage with this person? I have to build rapport. I have to come there asking some really insightful questions. I have to be able to speak to my work in a way that demonstrates like how I've actually built some level of transformation or team, wins or something. And I love what you shared to kind of double click on that, which is you've also and continue to share work that's failed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
no, I
talk to us about that, because that really goes hand in hand. All of this, I know you're not doing it to be an attraction, but is hugely attractive to
yeah.
obviously all the people that have reached out to you and your next opportunity, because there's a lot to be said for having a backbone. And
Well, yeah. I mean, like the funny thing for me, and I guess I've looked at this a little bit differently the last couple of years. I've sort of been on a campaign to destroy myself, meaning I think I really want to tear down this image that, because like somehow when you're an event and you're on stage, somehow people think because you're 2 or 3 feet higher up in the air, you have all the answers. 100% not true. Right? I have just as much imposter syndrome. I'm just as insecure, struggle with my work just as much. Like talking about things theoretically not terribly tough, actually pulling it off significantly harder. But look, I think a lot of what it is for me is that in your work, like, look, the world is full of people that can make pretty pictures. Like, even when I'm interviewing people, I like, tell me the story. Tell me what worked, what didn't, what was the journey, what was the big insight, like, what did you. And I did. Whenever I'll do a loop with a company and they ask me to sort of present 2 case studies, one of them is a 2-parter. And the first part is about how we had a good idea that didn't work. And what did we learn from it? And how did we pivot? And how did we shift how we worked with the C-suite? And how did we be able to do that? Because I think, in many cases, like for me, case studies are always a weird thing, right? Because it's always like trying to give somebody yesterday's winning lottery numbers. Like someplace that you're not at, with a team that you're not in, a problem that you don't have at a time that, again, like none of these things are now happened. You're hiring me for my thinking. You're hiring me for my skills in politics and work and creativity and vision and leadership, right? Like that's what you're hiring. So let's put that on display to say, look, this is not always going to go great. But here's what you're going to get in terms of like, how do you react? How do you pivot? And it's not just all sunshine and rainbows and like everything is great, because that's not realistic. But again, right. I think even that has been, some people are like, wow, like, that was just so different or so refreshing, to which I'm always like, look, you people need to start hanging out with different people, or like you need to start hiring different people if like being honest is different.
And so you actually have some, I guess, renewed perspective on what has been happening in the marketplace. And I want to have you speak to it, because clearly when you were in your last role, you were aware of what was going on, whether it be your team being poached or the marketplace being hot. And so what I'd love for you to share with us is, what is the Stephen Gates kind of POV on what you should be doing now to take advantage of what's happening in the marketplace and help us understand some of the things that you've been listening for that differentiate candidates and those that really shine and stand out.
Yeah, and look, and I think we'll see how this experiment turns out, because we're a week and a half in, and so far we have a lot of potential. Let's see what converts into reality. But look, I think right now it's just obviously because of the pandemic, the world changed. But for me, I think that what came out of that, and I think what drove it for me, a big part of the Great Resignation, was whenever we all were in person. And then all of a sudden, a week, later, everybody went and was remote. I had been already working remote for 2 or 3 years, back when it was this sort of like interesting sideshow. Like, oh, look at them. Isn't that cute? They all work from home. Like, we'd never do that. And then I spent 2 years talking to every CEO who could get time with me around, again, like how does this work? What's going on there? But I think what happened was, whenever we all were in person and we went remote, everybody's organizational sin came to the surface. You saw if your CEO or C-suite were more managers than leaders. You saw if you had bad process, bad tooling, lack of trust, right? Like all these things. I would joke with so many companies that apparently creativity didn't exist before hallways, because everybody was like, oh, well, like we used to run each other in the hallway and that's how we'd work. It's like, no, the teams that were good and really deliberate kept on being successful. The ones that relied on hallways struggled. But I think, so one, there was this reckoning of like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the company that I thought. I think two, we've seen a massive reprioritization in health, right? In mental health, again, I think what you're looking at, you've seen happen over the last couple of years in a lot of the arguments around racial equity and gender equity and a lot of different things like that to say, hey, look, we're not okay with things that are going to put us in this position. But I think you've also seen a lot of people really redefine what do they think the metrics of success are. 800,000 people have left New York, right? Like it is not that moniker of success that you have to live in this city or do this thing. Now, I think there'll be a bit of a contraction or a bit of a readjustment, but look, a lot of it for me is looking for, and I decided 4 years ago that I was going to leave New York City. I wanted to move back home to be closer to family in Pittsburgh. Again, much like being laid off, everybody's like, you're crazy. That'll never work. Again, we'll see. But look, I think right now you definitely see there are companies at different stages. I think I've talked to some that are like, look, you know, it's a hybrid role, but we need you in New York 4 days a week. And I'm like, that's not hybrid. That's summer Fridays, right? Like that's right. So that's, and they're like, well, and I literally talked to a company yesterday and they're like, oh, like we have all these open roles and we need this talent, but they have to be based in New York. And I said, look, I got a laundry list of people I can give you. None of them want to be in New York. So I think you have some that understandably are tied to real estate or things like that. And look, I get it. Like we need to be in person. I think I've turned down some that went the other way. They're like, look, we're totally remote. We're never going to get together. That won't work either. So I think some are embracing a little bit too much, right? Like you need some level of in-person. Even as at Envision, we would do that. But I think it's a blend. And I think some companies are figuring it out. I think we're going to see that over the next couple of years. But more than anything, I think that's what you're watching are companies try to figure out what do people want, right? Like what is this all about? I think both sides are trying to figure it out. But that's fresh, the part,
right?
Yeah, but what I would say, like this is why the biggest thing I'm doing right now is just having a ton of conversations. One is because almost all the jobs I get we do not end up where we start. So like go out, have that conversation. But that's my advice is like, look, if you've been laid off or fired, get loud because like I've had some companies will show up and they'll be like. I've had some companies show up and they'll be like, so which one of these 6 jobs are you interested in? And I'm like, do you not want to, do I need to talk about myself? And they're like, no, we looked, like, which one are you interested in? But that's the other part, like being chased is also super weird to me. Like having that level of power to vet these sort of things, super like fun, interesting. Again, we'll see how it works out, but very different.
Exactly. So I think that and we'll talk in a minute, Robin, but what I love is, and we were talking just prior to the show, that in the past, and I think for many of us, I know I've been in this situation, you know, oh company, hire me, you know, in a more of a slovenly, even in my case, desperate. Oh, I pray that I get this job. And now you are not only an example of somebody that's like, you know what, not going to work for me. And you're one of many that have really reprioritized, and understood that there is a very clear boundary. And I encourage anybody who's watching to have a boundary, to actually have one and adhere to it, because it will not eliminate the jobs that you're looking for. It will best align to the one that really matters. And I think that that's, you know, what is happening for you through all these conversations. How are you going to know if you don't have a means of comparison?
Right. Well, no, and this goes back to me, and I think, you know, I think one of the biggest things that I struggle with, everyone struggles with when you go through the process of getting hired is, right, you're like, oh, I have to appeal to everybody, right? Like I'm going to miss out on opportunity. Like so much of the brand strategy work that I've done has always been based in like, I want to build a brand that somebody hates, which always sounds a little clickbaity. But the reason why is because I want it to stand for something strong enough, have a point of view that is strong enough that if you love it, you love it. But other people look at it and go, not for me. Right. Like whenever we built W Hotels, for some people, it was amazing. It was cool. It was hip. Other people, it was like a reimagination of Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's exactly what we wanted. And I try to treat my personal brand the same way. Like, I sort of loved it the day that I got a Twitter account who's dedicated to just hating me, right? That's all it is, right? They just like, I wish they were more creative. I wish they had more to do. I wish like their creativity went some other place, but like they just want to hate me. And it's like, awesome, right? Like that means I'm saying something that stands for something. But I do. And my feeling has always been like, for me, everyone's not going to reach out to you. But I feel like the people who are like, yep, don't want that, those aren't jobs I'm going to want anyway. So like, let's just focus that process.
Right. So I do want to just kind of give some kudos to you and some of the people that are here. Joe Kwan, love the imagination element that Stephen is pulling out. There is a way you think things should be, and then there are opportunities you can imagine and create. Totally. Craig Davis, king of value. Have and create boundaries to save yourself from the wrong direction. 100%. And thanks for coming, Robin. HBO just recalled their staff in office at Hudson Yards as an example, waiting to see how that goes over resignations and jobs opening up. So lots of other comments. The winners will embrace this paradigm shift for sure. And it does take, I'm not gonna lie, you know, what you're demonstrating does take a lot of courage. Maybe not for you, but probably for most. Maybe not for you.
It does.
You have a higher level of tolerance for it.
Right. Well, but that's so literally the whole reason why, like I said, this is, you know, the crazy one was based out of my journey into that. I have Here's the Crazy Ones tattooed on my right arm, not as some Apple fanboy, but because I spent way too much of my career showing up as who I thought people wanted me to be, not as who I was. And the moment, whenever I started showing up as my authentic self, was the moment my career took off. And I think that it's hard to be able to do that. It's hard to be able to sort of lean into that. But again, I think, you know, for me, this is why I in therapy, because they've shown up for so long thinking there's a right way to do this. And again, I will tell anybody who will listen, nobody would tell you my career in reverse was a good idea, right? Like they're not, no art school is going to be like, oh, do it that. No one has ever said that, right? But to me, the crazy was based out of, especially for creative people, it's hard for us to find lookalikes, right? Like our upbringing, our education, our skills, our talent is always different than everybody else. And we exist in a society that teaches you that different is weaker, less, or wrong, right? So for me, the whole concept of the crazy ones came out of and based in that idea that no, what makes you different is your power. How do we help you see that and stop seeing it as your weakness? And I think that's a big piece of it. Like for me, it's not, and like I said, maybe it's just my perspective is off. I don't see it as bravery, I just see self-acceptance. That, you know, for me, just being honest with what is going on, or even being honest with, you know, how I feel, or like, yeah, there are good days when I really own it. And there are other days when I'm like, I am hoping I did not screw up my career and I'm going to tank my entire family's future. And like, I don't know if I can pull the, like, you know, look, there's sometimes a little imposter gremlin grabs the microphone and that happens. But But again, I think that's where, for so many of us, the fact that we can't just be honest and feel like we have to either follow a playbook that doesn't exist or an image, has been, you know, it's been interesting. And I think, Jason, for your question, so far, what I've been shocked at is how, even for me, how much salaries have changed. Like whenever I'll say my salary requirements, because I'm not cheap. I think I'm definitely not the most expensive, but I'm not cheap with my experience. This is the first time I've ever had startups that just were like, okay. And it's like, wait, what? Like, you know, you're a serious startup. Where they're like, that's fine. Market is like that. They're expecting. Look, there are few. And I think those were the ones that usually pretty quickly you can see they maybe are lagging a little bit on the market, because they're like, look, it's at 100% in office policy. Like you can tell they're just going back to where they were. And some of the salaries, because look, I've seen, even in trying to struggle in hang on to my own talent, I've seen companies that will, I mean, most of the designers I worked with knew they could go down the street and make $50,000 more. We had ones that they would go down and they would get 3 years worth of equity in a year in an accelerated schedule just because of what that was. I mean, this is a war on talent, right? I
Right.
think, this is, I think the New York Times said, like, basically digital creatives are like the number 3 job right now. I
I'm
think,
shaking
and
my head,
again,
not in a sense of disbelief, but what I'm shaking my head about is if you are in a situation where you have been either looking for a while, struggling, at a minimum, try something new, for goodness sakes. Try
yeah,
something new. Get loud. Get loud. And one of the things that you touch on is kind of a little bit of a cliche, but I do think it is worth repeating. Before you get to the outside job, the one that you're going to get compensated for, spend a little time on the inside job so that you understand what is tolerable for you, and then stretch from there. Because if you are changing your story from Friday to Monday, as you had alluded to, Friday you got laid off, Monday you're taking a sabbatical.
well,
you
I
know,
would also say just know what you want. And I've coached, again, for years and years. I would ask people, like, whenever I'd interview with them, do you know what you need to be happy at work?
Mm,
I had people come back 2 and 3 days later going, I haven't slept because I don't know the answer to that. The reason why I would ask that is I think, look, you need to be clear on what you want. If you look to your company or your boss to give it to you, so many people are going into the industry and saying, what would the industry give me? Not what do I want? And just
totally.
that simple pivot. And I would argue, if you want to do better in your existing job, if you want to get a new job, you need to be clear on what are the things that you want, what are the things that make you happy, like, where do you want to go? Because if you want to get promoted and do that in your current role, you need to know that. If you want to go to a new job and be able to level up on what that is, you need to know that. But I think but again, it goes back to me, like 90% of the time I can look at your resume and tell, right? If it just goes right into your education, if it goes right into where you worked, nothing about you, nothing about what makes you different, nothing about how you show up, I'm like, they don't know. And I think that
And
is,
how long would you estimate that takes you to figure out? How
as soon as I figure it out, I'll let you know.
no. I mean, in terms of looking at a resume and saying, "Oh, yes, next." What
I
do you
can
think that window is?
I mean, for me, I can do it in about 10 seconds. Like, I can tell, like, if your education is first, that usually means you haven't done anything in your career that you find more impressive than where you went to school.
Wait, stop.
If you
10 seconds, and you're resting off of your education, and that could be a little bit of a bait and switch for, I haven't really done anything.
Well, it could
Is
be,
that
but look, I'm not discarding these people because of these things. What
No,
I'm
no,
looking
no.
for
I'm
is,
not. Yes, of
right.
course.
Like, I'm trying to read between the lines in your portfolio and your resume to say, look, what is the skill set? Like, who is showing up? Because, like, for me, I tend to prioritize the softer skills. Because, look, I can teach you how to use Figma. I can teach you how to, I can teach all that stuff. I can't teach a lot of the softer skills. Education's a flag. For me, imposter syndrome is usually probably going to be an issue if you quote someone else. Like, if your portfolio starts with a quote from someone else, let's take a step back, right? Like, this is your portfolio to highlight your skill and your creativity, and you are showing off your creativity by talking about someone else's, right? There may be imposter syndrome there. I think, that constant look at, there is nothing about who they are, right? Just right into the work. Sometimes if the case studies are just screenshots, no level of story or process. Like, it actually got so bad that a few years ago, there's a document that I keep in Evernote that is just all of these stack responses. And I just copy and paste out of, like, you need to talk about who you are. You need to, like, tell the story of your case studies, just because I would see the same thing over and over and over and over. And that's why I said, because a lot of it for me is, I want to hire the person. I want to hire that unique skill set. I want to hire somebody that's going to bring something different to the table. And
This is one
trust
of
me,
the
Sean,
best comments.
giving a damn. But, and look, I think, Sean, to your point, the number one piece of advice that I give to everybody is always, like, success is a choice. Which meaning, are you going to put in that work? Are you going to do that self-reflection? Are you going to do those sort of things, really, in knowing that I don't know when this is going to pay off, but when it shows up, I'll be ready? Because I think too many people wait for the opportunity and then start preparing for it. Well, the problem is the opportunity passes you by the time you're ready. Again, I didn't know if I was going to get laid off ever again. Like, I just enjoy engaging with the community, but as a backup plan, if you get laid off, it's not a bad place to be able to have invested in that network and those sort of things for moments like this.
So I know that that you have helped so many people in this short half an hour. And you've given, I know Courtney mentioned something about, where is that comment? Here it is, Courtney. Love the shift in mindset. Some of us watched our parents get destroyed by layoffs. I'm no longer going to fear it. Thank you, Stephen. And I think that it's not just about having a brave face. It's also about having the ability to hold on to what it is that you've done and what it is that you want to do, so that you are not a victim to the process and really are understanding that you have a lot more control than you may think, but you have to exercise it. It's not gonna work in its own little genie bottle. Let it
Right.
out, let it out. And I think that this has been not only a powerful opportunity. Joe says, I love this one. Build it before you need it, right? Get busy now. Start taking the action. I know that's so, like, everyone says, take the action anyway, take the action anyway. Living proof right here. The turnaround was probably like Ripley's Believe It or Not, best recoveries for having other conversations. It wasn't like you were starting from ground zero. You were starting with all of the seeds that you've been planting for years and years and years, and all the great content, all of the networking and mentoring that you've done. And then what do people want to do? They want to reach out and help.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much, Stephen. So let me just ask you this. Where should people come and find you if they want to reach out to you for an opportunity? And what should somebody do what could somebody do as a give back for you right now? For all the people.
For most people, what I say is just like, yeah, if there's an opportunity you know about or something, just DM me on Instagram. I think the comments have got in, I think, almost to 500 on that post. So it's a little like LinkedIn actually starts to shut down. Like, yeah, if you know of anything, send it my way. But also at the same point, look, if you're going through that, if you're, again, sort of experiencing something, I know for Caroline, who'd sort of comment about watching her parents, like I've been in the same boat. I'm happy to help other people too. That if it's something where, if you want to have a conversation, if you want to help with that, so me, I do 3 such amazing to people list every Friday, or reach out to me and I'll see if we can find some time to be able to make that happen. I do coaching and other stuff like that. But yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. So you can either find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a note. I'm on every social media platform and stuff like that. Or you can always reach out to me through my site, which is just my name, StephenGates.com.
There you go. So good karma all the way around. Thank you so much, Stephen. Hang around for a minute or two afterwards. And thank you, everyone, for coming to Blast and a Half. And I am going to say it loud and proud. Get loud, too, because you can and because it works. So thank you, thank you, thank you. See you next week. Have an awesome rest of your day.